Now we got a perfect story of corruption in America, and it's about for-profit prisons. Now, how does this work? What do they do? What are the results for us? Well, I want to show you. The Associated Press did a brilliant story on this. First, they talk about a guy named Pedro Guzman as an example of what happens to an average American when they are faced with this, or someone that lives in America. Now, Pedro was here legally. He had been brought by his parents to the U.S. at the age of 8, but he worked and lived under a protected status. So he had his papers. He's totally fine. In fact, he's married to a U.S. citizen. So there should be no issue whatsoever. He's going to get a green card because of that. He's going to become a citizen. Now, he happened to miss one appearance, okay? So they go, all right, we got to lock him up. Now, I can understand that you go and question him and you say, why did you make the appearance? Didn't make the appearance. You got to bring him back, etc. Instead, they put him in prison. But did you notice this? He spent 19 months in prison. He's not here illegally. He's married to a U.S. citizen. 19 months in prison. Now, why is that? It's because there's a prison industrial complex that makes money off of imprisoning people like Pedro Guzman. So how does it work? Let me show you. All right. So in 2011, 50% of the beds in the nation's civil detention system, which takes the so-called illegal immigrants, some of which happen to be illegal, some of which apparently are not, and they house them in private facilities. But, you know, just a decade ago, that number was only 10%. So as far as privatizing goes, it has gotten much larger, from 10% to 50%. We're going to tell you in a little bit why that's the case. Now let me see the next slide. So in this one, 3,300 criminal immigrants were sent to private prisons under two 10-year contracts from the Federal Bureau of Prisons about a decade ago. That was to one of the largest companies that does for-profit prisons, CCA. Now that contract was worth $760 million. So you can see even a while back, well, okay, look, they were still spending some money on private prisons, $760 million, and you had 3,300 criminal immigrants sent there. Now, what are the numbers? Okay, now it's 23,000 rather than 3,300, and now it's gone from 760 million to $5.1 billion. Now that's just for this one private prison. Do you see how much money they make? You see the incentive that they have, and that the more they get government contracts to house more immigrants in their prison system, well, the more money they make and the more profits they make. All right, now let me see the next slide here. Well, this shows you that there's actually, in the pipeline, contracts for new facilities that could hold up to 400,000 immigrants detained annually. In other words, gimme, gimme, gimme. Now, if this is how you make your money and that's how you've profited, well, what are you going to do? Well, you have an incentive to go buy politicians so they get you that 400,000 immigrants that you need for more profits. Let me show you something else. Now, the total average nightly cost to taxpayers for undocumented immigrants being housed, including their health care and the guards, is now up to $166 per day. Okay, now what was it in 2004? It was 80 bucks. So in 8 years, it has more than doubled. Now, wait a minute, I thought the whole point of the private prisons was that it was supposed to be cheaper, it was supposed to save us money. But they haven't saved us money. They've doubled the cost. So how can they get away with this? How can they double the cost? How can they get so much more people put into prison so they can make more money? Well, it's easy. It's called America. You just buy the politicians. So let me show you. So from 2003 to 2012, they gave state candidates and political parties, that's just at the state level, not the federal level, $5.32 million. That buys you a lot of state politicians. All of a sudden, Florida, so many different states. Oh, yeah, the scourge of undocumented immigrants. I tell you what, we got to really make sure they go to a private prison. Believe me, at the state level, that's a tremendous amount of money. Well, how about overall? Just the top 3 for-profit prison companies, that's Corrections Corporation of America, CCA that we mentioned earlier, the GEO Group, and Management Training Group as well, spent at least $45 million combined on campaign donations and lobbyists at the state and federal level in the last decade. Now, you spend $45 million and you get back billions in profits. Wouldn't you do it? So if you allowed this kind of corruption in our system, of course people are going to jump in it. Of course that's what they're going to do. Of course they're going to feed the money to the politicians. But what's the result? Well, the result is twofold. One is more of us go to prison. Now, in some of these cases, it's undocumented immigrants, as with the case of Pedro Guzman. It's a guy that had no business being in prison for 19 months. And it's not just with the immigrant cases. They also do it to citizens on other things. Why do you think there's so many drug laws? Because we need more people in prison. Oh my God, marijuana, what a scourge. We need a war on drugs. Put them in prison, put them in prison. So these guys can make more money. Now, how much did this cost taxpayers? It cost us show me that, Jesus, $2 billion. Just in 2012, that's what it's going to cost us. So not only does it hurt the people that are actually being sent to prison, but it costs all of us this giant amount of taxpayer money, which we are theoretically saving because, you know, everything private is so much more efficient. When in reality, of course, that's not the case at all. It just funnels the money to the corporations that buy our politicians. This system is sick. It needs to be fixed. It's crushing us. The average guy doesn't stand a chance. I mean, look, some of you might know folks, you might be in a bracket where you can go get a lawyer, no problem, etc. But if you're a regular guy like Pedro Guzman was, and these guys are going to make $2 billion off of you collectively, and they've already given $45 million to politicians, what chance do you stand? You don't stand a chance at all. You're going to spend 19 months in prison, and they're going to make a buck off you. Unfortunately, that's what this great country has turned into. They are privatizing and selling off the whole country, including essential government services like who we imprison. I mean, if the government doesn't do that, and we allow private corporations to profit off of imprisoning our fellow citizens, what do you think was going to happen? Of course more of us are going to be in prison, and in fact, you know what we are? We're #1 in the world in imprisoning people per capita. That's because somebody's making a buck off it.